Everyone would agree that war is a harsh time. Unfortunately, some individuals lose their humanity during wartime and commit cruel crimes. World War II became the bloodiest conflict in human history. Germany was the leading perpetrator of atrocities. However, the world rarely remembers the country that ranked second in brutality. Today, we will talk about Germany's strongest ally, Japan. Many may not be aware, but the Japanese, like the Germans, committed countless horrific crimes. They killed and raped their prisoners and conducted experiments on them using various weapons, including chemical and biological ones. Japanese soldiers had what were known as death marches. They forced people to travel incredibly long distances without food or water, either in extreme heat or bitter cold. Perhaps they wanted to test human endurance to see how far a person could go. Many did not survive these death marches. Today, little is known about these crimes because the Japanese made sure to destroy all records, any information that could tarnish their reputation. One of the darkest chapters in their history that they tried to erase is what became known as the comfort stations. The records of these comfort stations were so well hidden that only in late 2000 did the International Tribunal begin investigating these brutal atrocities. The Japanese captured women and turned them into sex slaves. This happened with the approval of high-ranking military officials. And when the investigation was conducted in 2000, only 60 people were willing to testify. These were women from China, Indonesia, North and South Korea, the Philippines, and Taiwan. Through their testimonies, it became clear that horrific sexual crimes were carried out with the sanction of the Japanese government. The victims suffered severe psychological trauma and, of course, demanded justice and retribution. Let's try to reconstruct the sequence of events. Japanese soldiers in occupied territories, armed and feeling their power and impunity, needed women for relaxation. As a result, incidents of rape became frequent, which fueled negative sentiments and unrest, something the authorities wanted to avoid. To prevent uprisings, the idea of creating comfort stations emerged, places where soldiers could rest. The first such station was opened in Shanghai and was originally intended to be staffed by Japanese women volunteering for the role. However, few Japanese women were willing to work there. A shortage of workers arose, and they had to be sourced elsewhere, mainly from occupied territories. Women were lured with promises of high wages. During wartime, any opportunity to earn money seemed like a chance to survive. But as soon as they agreed, they found themselves trapped in barracks behind barbed wire, transformed into sex slaves. How many women were forced into this? Estimates vary, with numbers ranging between 200,000 and 400,000. This is an enormous figure, and one might think it would be enough to meet the demand. But in reality, these women were worked to exhaustion, and many died due to cruel treatment and unbearable conditions. They were beaten for disobedience, and for more serious offenses, they were executed, beheaded with a sword. Under such conditions, many could not endure and sought ways to end their own lives. The statistics were staggering. 9 out of 10 comfort station inhabitants ended up committing suicide. Apparently, word about these stations spread quickly. Deception and false promises of high wages no longer worked. No one wanted to end up in sexual slavery. Since there was a constant shortage of women in comfort stations, a steady supply of new captives was needed. Recruiters resorted to simply abducting women from the streets or buying them from impoverished areas. But even that was not enough, and they turned to even more radical measures. One recruiter revealed what he had to do to procure new women and turn them into sex slaves. He admitted to being a hunter of Korean women. He managed to capture over 1,000. If they resisted, they were kicked and beaten. If they had infants, the children were simply taken away. All of this happened under the watchful eye of the police. Transporting the women to the comfort stations was another challenge. They were packed into train cars like cargo and sent off in freight trains or loaded onto ships. New comfort stations were established at a staggering pace. In China alone, there were over 300. The number of military brothels in other occupied countries is impossible to determine, but it is believed that there were well over 1,000 such facilities. One of the most horrifying facts is that the minimum age for these women was 11 years old, and given the inhumane conditions in the barracks, by the time they reached their early 30s, they were no longer considered suitable for service. What happened to them after that? If so few survivors were willing to testify, one can assume that the Japanese military erased any evidence, meaning they eliminated the women. The comfort women lived in groups of 10 per barracks, with only a cot, a sink, and a straw mat as furnishings. By all descriptions, it was nothing short of a prison. Their mental health deteriorated rapidly. Many accepted that only death could free them from their suffering. They often sought to hasten their end. Some managed to steal opium from soldiers for an overdose, while others hanged themselves with makeshift ropes made from their own clothing. By the way, what do you think happened to a woman who miraculously survived past 30 and was no longer needed at the comfort station? Perhaps, after their service, these women were subjected to experiments. Japanese doctors, like their Nazi counterparts, conducted horrific experiments on humans. So, for these women, the nightmare may not have ended. It may have only just begun, though likely it ended quickly. Another major problem for the authorities was pregnancy among the women in these stations. To solve this issue, they were poisoned with a drug called 606, which contained arsenic. This poison did prevent pregnancies, but in higher doses, it killed not only the fetus, but also the mother. At some point, images of these field comfort stations leaked to the press, sparking public outrage. However, the Japanese government refused to acknowledge their existence. Japan defended itself by claiming that these establishments were supposedly on their own territory, not in occupied lands. They also insisted that the women worked there voluntarily and were well compensated. The government denied any involvement, arguing that these were private businesses. In 2007, the Japanese government stated that there was no evidence of mistreatment of women or proof that they had been forced into prostitution. This statement provoked outrage from other nations. Eventually, Japan's prime minister was forced to acknowledge the existence of comfort stations, effectively declassifying them. The governments of the United States, Canada, and several European countries demanded that Japan be held accountable for its war crimes. Finally, on December 28, 2015, the Japanese leadership admitted the existence of military comfort stations and the brutal mistreatment of the women. They also expressed willingness to pay compensation to the victims. But can such horrors ever truly be compensated?